Michael O'Hanlon is a senior fellow with the Center for 21st Century Security and Intelligence. He's also director of research for the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. And I asked him for his assessment of the situation in Syria.
I don't think that the Russians and the Syrians are very serious about any ceasefire or any humanitarian pause. They sense a victory that is not too far away. They would argue to themselves, and perhaps to us, if being truly honest, that the best thing they can do to save lives is to win the war quickly after 5 years of stagnation. And so going along with these ceasefires, that's something they'll do if it's not too inconvenient, if it doesn't disrupt their battle plan. But they really are not that serious about it. They're saying all the right words to make us feel they are serious, but in truth, they are in this to win it. And I think that's the fundamental presumption we should start with in regard to any Russian or Syrian motives. If we don't think that way, I believe we're being duped. In fact, I think that's what's been going on for much of the last couple of years, and I think to some extent Secretary Kerry has allowed himself to be played in the course of peace talks and humanitarian pause talks that, for the most part, have never really been serious on the side of Moscow and Damascus.
Michael, is a government victory in Aleppo a tipping point in Syria's civil war? Will it end the war?
It is a tipping point. It will not end the war. And what I mean by that is that certainly if the government, backed up by Russia and Hezbollah and some other fighters, controls virtually all of the major cities of the country, it's hard to see its position as teetering on the verge of defeat. It's hard to see the war as truly stagnated. It's hard to see any pressure on Assad to step aside. And so therefore you could argue that his minimal goals have been largely achieved. He is, by all accounts at that point, still the president of Syria, and the country has at least some resemblance to its previous pre-war state. On the other hand, you have huge swaths of the center-north and the northern and northeastern areas, and of course the entire east, that are not under government control, and where Assad almost certainly does not have the necessary manpower, even when backed up by foreign actors, to actually consolidate control, as we just saw recently in Palmyra, where ISIS actually took back the town from government control for at least a while. And so I think what you're likely to see is a low to mid-grade civil war indefinitely. And the continuation of the war will also impede the international community from providing the kind of reconstruction assistance that's really going to be needed for Syria to get back on its feet after this devastating conflict. So the war will not end, the peace will not break out, reconstruction will not seriously commence, and Syria will continue to experience a tragic future, even if it's not quite as violent as it's been for most of the last half-decade.
Michael, what happens to the rebels after Aleppo? What happens, you mentioned ISIL, what does this mean for ISIL?
Well, I think that with Donald Trump coming into the White House and with most of the Syrian government power now having successfully, along with Russia and Hezbollah, taken control of these major cities, you could imagine the government swinging a bit more of its focus against ISIS. And you could imagine the United States perhaps intensifying its cooperation with Russia in the new year after January 20th. But I think ISIS was losing anyhow. And so the trend line there may accelerate a little bit, but it's probably not going to change fundamentally. I think the bigger question is going to be, how can we handle al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda affiliate, which is more based in the center and the north of the country, and also other Salafist extremist insurgent groups that so far Assad has been able to push out of the cities, but he hasn't really been able to defeat wholesale. And so there, I think you're likely to see a continuation of the conflict. So Raqqa might be taken away from ISIS at some point in 2017. I certainly hope so. But I don't think that means the end to the war or even the end to the extremist factions fighting against Assad within Syria.